Hello engravers, this is Justin here. This is another video in our series for the June 2020 Engraving Challenge. And we're looking at The Romance by Amy Beach. This is an entry from Tom Hart. We have our piano score here and our violin part here. So I'm going to start in the piano score, and most of what I have to say in the piano score will probably apply in the violin part as well. Definitely the first thing I'm noticing is it's taking a very literal view of the original. A lot of the same typical practices you would see, just an obvious one, things like this, where you're having the periods, the all caps, right, of the names, the old Amy Beach name like that would not be done anymore in a modern edition. So I can tell that this is trying to remain faithful to the original, but there's a few things here and there that are different. So let's have a look. Few things right off the bat that I would talk about. The page size is A4, which is not ideal for engraving. It causes the density to be messed with a bit. And you'll see that when we talk about the layout in general. I'm just going to get in close here and measure. So you see our piano staff is 6 millimeters. Oop, there we go. And the violin staff is 5. So not a huge difference between them, but it's enough. It's a little bit on the low side, I think, for a piano staff, but it's not the end of the world. But I wouldn't go any smaller than that. And I think that's the reason that this engraving was forced to use a smaller size is directly related to the page size. Because that extra width is not there, and height by extension, it really causes the layout to be more condensed horizontally. Otherwise, you would have to be forced to do 3 bars per system, and this would be a much longer part, and the density would look silly. So the other thing I do want to mention here is this is using almost entirely, it looks like Sibelius to me. This is Sibelius's default settings. It's using the Opus font. It's using the Plantin. I think it's Plantin. It looks like Plantin to me. And there's various just lack of attention to detail because this engraving just relies on the program to just get it right. And unfortunately, and this is true of a lot of engraving programs, pretty much all of them, they all have defaults that have issues, So it's something to think about, is definitely don't just trust your engraving program, because there are certain things that it's just not going to do well. A couple things up the front here. This is missing a bass clef. And you can tell it was supposed to be a bass clef because you've got this guy here. So you got to commit to one or the other. That's a pretty important thing. And, I would probably do 4/4 here rather than common time. Common time has kind of fallen out of favor because it's a much older convention. And also notice if you do put this in bass clef, your alignment of dynamics here no longer becomes necessary, and you can reduce the amount of space between these two staves. So let's talk about this here a little bit. There's no reason to align these. You see these? That's relying on the magnetic layout of Sibelius. There's no reason to align these. They have nothing to do with each other. So what you should be doing is putting this up here. And then if you really wanted to, you could nudge up this diminuendo a bit and mask the stems if you really wanted to. Some other entries have done that. This entry does respect the original eighth notes beaming. So these, the 3/8 in a row, we've said it before, you can do it like this. But I'm not going to mark it any further, because if this engraving just goes with it, then that's what they're going to go with. This is one that I have less, I'm less happy about, because you would definitely want to break that in a modern edition, so that this is an eighth note, because you're crossing the middle of the bar. Same right here. And then this would become 2 separate eighths, and that would break right there. Okay. This, I'm not sure what's going on down here, but this should not be there. This should be underneath. And then we can talk about slurs a little bit. Sibelius has some interesting opinions when it comes to slurs and multiple voices, especially like right here. So what it's trying to do is keep it consistent where the slur ends are attaching to the stem. The problem with this is it causes the slurs to get way up out of the voice, when it's usually more useful to do something like this, where it's actually closer into the voice and getting right down to those note heads. And you see that a lot. Like this one too here seems a little silly. Though in this case, where you would split that, you would have to do something like this. Now that's kind of ugly with me drawing with a mouse, but you get the idea. This is okay if you're going to insist on the downstem B. That's fine. I might want to put that slur tip in right there. Just get it a little bit closer. And then this edition, interestingly, has decided to break all of these syncopations between 2 and 3, which is fine. That's a legitimate choice to make, but I find that interesting that this edition breaks those, but also keeps the 3/8 and the dotted quarters across the middle. So it's a bit inconsistent editorially there, and I would definitely make that more consistent. There's nothing really offensive about this. Again, it's just defaults. This slur right here is not great. This should be, get it right in that space there. You should always get those slur tips as close as possible to those note heads, in the closest space possible. Next page. This is another default thing that happens a lot because of magnetic layout. The slur doesn't really know how to encounter this natural gracefully, so it'll just stop it short, but it really needs to go all the way across. And I'm going to undo that actually. As a result, you actually want a bit of a tighter curve there on that. There's no reason for it to be so loopy. Same here. This is a bit of a strange one, where you're going from a stems up voice 1 to stems down voice 1. Sibelius doesn't handle that properly. You would have to do something like that. So like that kind of finesse is really what it's all about. Here's another one. Magnetic layout is trying to solve this, but it can't. So you just have to show it what to do. This is a great case study in how the defaults don't really cut it when it comes to this sort of thing. Pretty good. The externals are all aligned there. Good. There's a downstem B again. Fine. If you're going to do it up, that's how you would do it. This is interesting. The user definitely tried to correct this. It feels a little bit overcompensated. I know we're trying to avoid this little line here. It's a little bit weird. Try to smooth that out just a little bit. And again here, get it right into there. This one actually needs a little bit more space on that guy. So actually I'd pull the arc out on that one. And then if we really want to start getting picky about the defaults, you know, things like these ties, that's not good at all, because the tie is sitting inside on the line or inside the line, so it's almost merging with the staff line. So what you really want to do is do something like this. I know that's not a great example. Let me try again. This is a little tricky to do with the mouse, but you definitely want to have a little bit of white space in there, right? Let's see if I can find an example where I can draw that. I don't have a good example. I'll find one. You definitely want to have a little bit of white space in between the staff line and the curve of the bowl of that tie. That's subtle, but it makes a huge difference in readability. And sometimes Sibelius does that pretty well, like right here. It's entirely within the staff space, so that's very easy to read. Again, there's that quarter note. Actually, this one's fine. This is on beat 3. Here's one where Sibelius is trying to work with this, you know, putting the slur way at the end. Again, not ideal. It should really be something like that. Next page. See, here's one. See, there's barely a little sliver in there. What I tend to do in situations like this is actually get these slur tips, or the tie ends, and move them so that they actually rest in the center of the staff. I know that's really subtle. That's about a third of a space difference, but that gives you a lot more white space in between the staff line there, and it makes it a lot easier to see. This looks like an error here. That F sharp, I don't think that's correct. That's supposed to be an octave down. I'm not sure why that is. Someone can check on that for me. Here's another one. Sibelius is trying to get this to work, but it doesn't. Get it right in there. Same here. Right down to the note head. Same here. Naturals are really bad with this. Especially like the default opus and all that. It does a bad job of that stuff. These are totally not needed. These cautionaries. It's a piano score. You know, the pianist can look back as to what's going on over here. It's fine. They're not gonna have any problems there. A little more space there. Same thing we talked about there. This is not centered, this double P. I probably would give that rest a little bit more room. Just give it a little more breathing room there. Also, this is getting really tight. This spacing. And see how inconsistent that is? I know it's because of the 32nd notes, but we can do better than that. And one thing I like to do is sort of fudge it sometimes. So like move this 8th note just ever so slightly over so that it looks like this is more consistently 8ths, even if it isn't actually exactly fitting. As long as it's not over top of the 32nds, it'll be clear. You do the same here. Just move that 8th note just a little bit that direction. And we could probably tighten these up a little bit too. And probably this entire chord I would move over just a little bit. Not a big amount. Maybe half a space or so. That clef changes in the original. The slur is not great. Again, get it right down in there. Again here. That's not a great example. Let me do that. There we go. Okay. Next page. And then honestly, it's just more of the same. So it's more of the same issues. It's just a lot of the default settings that need tweaking. I think I will comment on how the staff spacing is kind of switching a lot, and it might be a reliance on magnetic layout. I'm not sure. But for example, this is very large, while this isn't. And there's no real reason for that. There's a huge, right in here, there's a huge amount of white space in there that really should be, used up or taken away or whatever. Okay, then we're starting the triplets. I would get this in the staff. I don't see any reason not to there. I know that's another default. That little slur there. Get it right in there. Whoop. Again, cautionary, not needed. This is a little weird. I probably would put this stems up, because that's the lowest note, is the E sharp there. And then as a result, the slur goes underneath. Again, slurs, get them right into the space. And you can tell right here is where some of the slurs get really, really funky. Right, so get them all the way down. All the way down. You got lots of room for it. And one little trick that I do, that one's not a great example. Let me get down. There we go. One thing I definitely want to emphasize is keeping the arc of the slur consistent. And one little trick that I do is to sometimes put the slur end not exactly centered on the note head. So maybe like put it on the first third of the note head. Not sure if I can draw that easily with this mouse, but say we're right here, that's right in the middle. But what you could do is start the slur tip like right there. So it gives you a little bit more arc. And the same thing here. Put it on the first third here. So I would definitely improve all the slurs in this area. Work on getting them a little bit more curved. They're a bit flat by default, etc., etc. Okay, now we do have all these triplets being marked. That's good. It's very clear. For this one, I would definitely break that as 2/8 rests. Let's see what else we got here. Next page. Another slur there. Yeah, it's more the same with the slurs, so I don't think I'm going to mark them much anymore, unless they're really bad. So here's one where, because of that natural, it messes with the algorithm. So yeah, you actually have to force that to not be so bulbous. This is a little close there. Pull that down a bit. This is a tricky slur here because you don't have a lot of room to work with. So that one you might actually leave as is. This is one of those cases where you are forced to just not put it at the exact next space. That happens, but a lot of the time people don't try. You got to really try and get it in there, and if you really can't, then you go to the next best thing. Nice masking on the poco writ there. That's good to see. Definitely would have put this treble clef sooner. Probably right there. Could also do it at the beginning of the measure or somewhere in there. Okay, now we're getting into the portato section. This is all fine. That's a bit weird having that so low under an 8 VA. Not sure about that. Now we're back into triplet land. This should be right next to this. Right? That's a little subtle thing. Let me use the proper symbol for that. Move it over so it's one continuous expression. And also this, having those not aligned just looks a little silly. Bring that mezzo forte down a little bit. Whoops. This section here, I would probably just write up. I wouldn't bother with the 8 VA. But you can if you want to. I think that was in the original. Again, there's another slur. I do think, you know, by the time we get to this point, the triplets are firmly established, and now viewing all these threes everywhere is starting to get tedious. So probably after this measure, starting at 94 here, I would get rid of all these. And if you really want to, you can do simile, right? Sim, like that. And that would apply all the way down throughout this whole section, because it's very clearly in a triplet mode, pretty much to the end of the piece. Here's another slur, and this one should probably go all the way to the end there. This is fine. It's just mimicking the original. Again, all these triplets are just getting in the way. They don't add anything here. They're just they're not really clarifying anything, because everything is triplet based except for like the outer voices, but they don't have any duple eighth notes, so it doesn't actually help to mark everything as triplets. These eighth rests are too close. Get those up one level. And this, you can see here, because of the triplets getting in the way of the hairpins, this distance is way, way too much. There's no reason to have that much distance there. So that's one big example of, you know, just get rid of the extra stuff on the page that's not really helping anything. Same right here. If it's just for this, that doesn't make sense. Just get rid of it. For this guy, definitely do slur above and do 16ths instead of 30 seconds. That's been standardized. This trill is positioned very funny. I'm not sure why it's there. It should be like that. That's a horrible. Do that again. T, R should be right over that note. There's another slur. This one should go all the way down there. Get it right down into that spot, closest to the head note, closest to the note head as possible. Here's a really subtle thing that the defaults don't really account for. You want the arc of the tie and the slur to match. Right? So I'm not going to draw that very well with a mouse, but you can see over the course of this tie, the slur, like the distance between them is constant or close to constant. And what's annoying in the defaults is you can see here how they're approximately a space apart, not quite, but it's constant until you get about here, and then it starts to narrow. See that white gap in between the two? So you definitely want to get rid of that change. You want to keep that distance consistent. It looks a lot better. Again, the triplets are getting in the way here of your 8 VA. right? So this should be all the way down there. And this looks like an error to me. That should be an octave down because it's already up by an octave. And, you know, here we go. Get those slurs all the way down there. And that's pretty much it. Let's very quickly look at the violin part. There's not much to say here that hasn't already been said because, again, it's using the defaults settings. I mean, the biggest issue is this is marked as a page 1 and then a page 2 with a VS, which is just not how this would be printed. If it was actually on 2 pages, this would be marked on a page 2 and 3 as a reverse fold part or as a part with a title page. So that's just a major thing for layout decisions here. The VS would not be needed because you would see 2 pages at the same time. That's why this is in a funny manner on my screen because it's expecting a page 1 spread. And you know, this part feels a little sloppy at times. It is 7mm and it is quite dense, which is nice. This part can feel a little sloppy at times. And part of that is just it's adhering to the defaults, and the defaults are not doing a great service to it. So, you know, collision there, for example. A lot of the things about all the slurs, they all apply here. This slur is way too far out, and that's because of the sharp. Like this here, there's no reason to align those. They're totally unrelated, and both of these can come way up, right? And that removes the requirement for this gap to be different than all the others. Also, you need an indent here. Should be 5. Oh, that was terrible. 5 spaces gap indent. Looking at the next page. Yeah, not much to say. And it's mimicking the original in terms of how it uses the AVAs and stuff, which is fine. You could probably get away with not doing it, but the editorial decision for this edition was to just keep it, so that's fine. This is a little bit tricky right here. Where does the hairpin start? And also this molto here actually has nothing to do with the odd tempo. So again, no reason to really align those, and I could easily see those two not. I know they are related, but this could probably be written in a different way. What you would more likely see today is molto writ instead of just the molto implied from the previous measure. Also, this is really bad. Spilling into the margin like that, that's really not a good idea. And also, one thing you really want to avoid is right here you have the distance between the objects of the bottom system is actually smaller than the distance of the object to its own system. That's something you really want to avoid. So get these up that way. And I say just in general, I think your dynamics could get a bit closer, except this one, which is actually too far. But that's definitely a default thing that Sibelius does, where the dynamics in general just are too far away when they could get closer. So like get them no more than a space away from that bottom, which I know doesn't look like a lot. This is probably a space and a half, but that does help really really anchor that dynamic to that staff, especially in ambiguous situations, you know. And there was one spot right here where you've got all of these aligned together. Again, they have nothing to do with each other. This whole group here could come up. this stuff here, they're separated by a whole bar of rest. These have nothing to do with each other. And that's entirely the fault of the magnetic layout, trying to keep them all together. All right. Oh, and definitely break that one. I didn't see that one before. Definitely would break that one. And then there's just lots of little slur things, but we already talked about that. So, all right. So thank you for submitting this one, and we will see you in the next one.